So first of all, we're going to focus on the web interface today. When we get into the report builder, almost everything that you see is going to be available in Key Configure as well. Things are a little bit, they look a little bit different. They're arranged slightly differently, but you'll find all the same options. So if you are a user that tends to gravitate toward Key Configure, you'll be able to find everything that we're doing here in that interface as well. So the first thing we're going to have a quick look at here is this main reports page. And all of the reports that you find on this page are what we call one-click templates or one-click tiles. And you can modify these. You can also create new ones. This server you see has a bunch of non-default ones. I think there's 8 in a default server. So if you see 8 that all have titles and descriptions like this, those are probably the default ones that were built in when you first installed the product. But we'll show you how to create new ones or even modify those as we go along. We're going to talk about running report, immediate reports, ones where you just jump into the report builder, configure it, and click run. And then we'll talk about how to create templates like these one-click templates, but also scheduled reports that will be run automatically, and you can have those emailed out or embed them on a dashboard. So we'll talk about a lot of different ways of kind of getting the data out of the system. So we'll come back here in a minute. Most of our time is going to be spent in the report builder and the saved reports page, but really primarily we're going to walk through the report builder, talk about the different report types, the different abbreviations and categories, kind of walk through the setup of different types of reports with the options and things. All right, so we are going to, first of all, talk a little bit about the different report types. I think there's 175, maybe more than that, reports in this dropdown here. And you see some of them are relatively self-explanatory based on the title. Some of them have rather cryptic names with abbreviations that don't all necessarily make immediate sense. So let's start there and talk about the abbreviations. In Key Configure, it's actually a little bit easier to navigate the menus because they're categorized. Charts, logins, usage, reports are all organized in categories. So you at least get a basic idea. The idea here in the web interface is everything's visible, and you can come up into the search bar and type a keyword, and it will filter the view to just things that are related to what you've typed. And it will search both the report name as well as the description that you can't see here to pull in reports. So if you type something like usage, for example, there's a lot of reports here that don't actually have the word usage in the name. That's because there's a background description, and all of these have that word usage somewhere in there. And then some of them actually have usage in the name. So that's the first thing you're going to do if you've got basically something that you're looking for: computers, devices, usage, logins, a histogram report. Start by just typing that keyword in this dropdown, and it will filter the results to give you a shorter list that's going to hopefully get you closer to what you're looking for. Second, let's go through some of these abbreviations. Some of them are pretty obvious: computer, Compass computer, program, product. The difference you may know between a program and a product, that's important to know, is that a program is the actual executable file that is launched on the computer, whereas a product is a little bit more abstract. Our product recognition service is an online repository of software product definitions, and products are made up of programs. So Adobe Creative Cloud is a product. And there may be a program called Adobe Creative Cloud, but that's a utility, that's a background process. It's not really what you use when you're using that product. Similar with Microsoft Office, AutoCAD, or the Autodesk suites, those products are made up of programs. And we can report at the product level, or we can report at the program level. So that's the difference. If I select to run a program report, and I'll do this now and just do a quick, well, this is an audit report, so it's not going to give me what I was looking for. So in this case, it's showing what's installed. But we can see that what's installed at the program level are the very specific executable names as opposed to the product names. So that's another thing to point out here. Audit means what's installed. It's software related and it has to do with what is installed. Path is going to be the file path. So if you need that, that's a great way to kind of see where programs are installed or discovered on computers. And then as we kind of make our way down here, SN is serial number. And the important ones to know, of course, are comp for computer, prod and program for product and program. Div is your computer divisions. And then there might be a couple of others. User is self-explanatory. PLCY is policy. You'll see that. That's probably important to stop and talk about briefly because we don't really have a lot of references to policies in the web interface. Our original use case for our product was license management. So we were doing concurrent use license management for Adobe Creative Suite back in the day. And a policy is what you would create in the key configure interface to allow you to manage those licenses, define how many you have, what the license metric is, and actually control access to software. These days, there's a lot less need for that active license control or license management. And policies can also be used just to track usage of software. So if you've used the web interface and you're familiar with this, if I come under software to this manage page, when I click this green dot to track usage, even though there's no reference to policies here in the web or very few, what I'm actually doing if I were to log into the admin console in Key Configure and open up the policies window is I would see that there's a yellow icon, observe only policy being created when I do that. And so if we take a quick look at one of these that has a policy associated with it, let's just go into 7-zip really quickly here. I can see policies in the web and I can actually go into those policies. And what I see is that this is an observe policy set up for the 7-zip product family. Getting a little bit further down the road of policies than I really intended, but I just wanted to explain that term so that you understand back on the report builder page that when we are talking about policy reports, we're reporting at that level. Policies can contain multiple products and they could theoretically contain multiple product families. And so where running a report at the program level is going to break a product down into the individual executable components, running a report at the policy level could aggregate usage across multiple products if you happen to have multiple products in one policy. For the most part, though, if you see a report that has PLCY in the name, for the most part, it's going to look a lot like a product report. And I think that's most of the important ones to know about. You see something like fix here, that's a hot fix. These are going to show you Windows security updates. There are things like pool in some of these reports. We don't see many of those anymore, but you see publisher. Pool, you probably never need to worry about, but basically in policies, you can create computer pools or computer groups that are provided priority access during certain hours. There's various ways of using pools. Not a common thing these days. You can probably ignore it. And I think that covers most, if not all, of the abbreviations, what they mean anyway, which hopefully gets you a little bit closer to guessing what you might get when you actually run a report. Again, there are a lot of options here, and there's some trial and error involved in finding the exact report that's going to get you what you need. When we talk about creating those one-click templates, the idea there, the reason those exist is because they really allow you to take that list of 175 reports and after you do a little bit of that trial and error to find a report that you really like, they allow you to pre-configure a version of that report that's just ready to run when you log in, based on your configuration that you like. And then from there, it's easy to pivot and make changes on the fly without modifying your template. So that's where we're headed. Before we get there, because this is a long list, I wanted to at least point your attention to a few reports in particular that tend to be kind of the most popular ones, or things that people get a lot of value out of regularly. So if you're taking notes, this is a good thing to keep in mind. I'm going to start with this computers report. It is a basically static computer configuration report. This is going to show you hardware details. One thing I do want to remind you, if you haven't seen it before, is that this scope at the top, the scoping button, it's like a funnel or filter, allows you to make a selection of either computer division or a section or another location that is going to allow you to restrict the data in a report to that particular computer group. So if I come in here and select Adams Lab 1 and run this report, I'm going to get the hardware configuration details for the computers just in that room. So you could see this is kind of a report that's going to give you static computer hardware information. If I go back into the report builder here, I'm going to come down, I'm going to jump to options, to columns, just to show you the ones that are visible by default are here on the left, but there are a lot of additional columns that you can add to this report. And then of course you can rearrange them, dragging and dropping them around to really refine this and get you the data in the order and the arrangement that you want. So computers report, very useful, very helpful. Probably the most valuable report in this product over the last few years that I have seen in terms of new customers onboarding with the product. The low-hanging fruit way to save the most money the fastest is going to be the histogram logins div report. So if you haven't seen this one, I'm going to go ahead and run it for you. It's called histogram logins div. And this is perfect for getting a concurrent usage chart of computer logins by location, by division. So in this case, I've got one division, and what I can see in that division is concurrent logins, in this case over the last 30 days. The blue line at the top is the total number of computers that are in that division, and then the pink dot represents the peak usage, concurrent usage. So we see that in a room of 74 computers over the last 30 days, we're very regularly hitting 60. That's the peak. We hit it a few times a week, but we never go above that. So if I was managing labs and I saw a chart like this and I ran it over 60 days, 90 days, the last year or so, this tells me that we don't need 74 computers in this room. Clearly, we're never using more than 60 at any one time. Another one similar in terms of use, why you might need it, is called logins div cross comp. So division by computer, logins division by computer. And again, if I run this, what I'm going to get, rather than that histogram chart that shows me concurrent usage, this one is really about totals and averages. So broken down by division, and I think I still have Adams Lab 1 selected, so we're just going to see the computers in that one division listed. But we see each individual computer, and we see the total amount of time that was spent logged in. We're also going to see active time and idle time. On this particular demo server, it's got a simulator that isn't simulating idle time, so that column is blank. But on a live real server with real computers connected to it, what this is how much time was spent with a user actively using that machine versus how much time was spent where they walked away and weren't actively using the keyboard and mouse. And then the total count, of course, is the number of logins in total during the date range of the report. When we look at some of these, so if I go back to logins, we see there's a list of logins reports, and they have different abbreviations between. So what we looked at is div cross comp. Div cross user would look just like that report we just ran, but instead of each computer broken out, it would show me a list of all the users that have logged into a computer in that room during that date range, regardless of which computer they use, and it would aggregate usage by user. And then you'll see ones that kind of flip the view. So instead of division by computer, computer by division or computer by user is going to actually put the computer first, and then underneath it, it will break down whatever it is that follows it. So another thing to kind of see about these reports once they run, and I'll show you one thing now. I'll show you the rest of these options after. Especially when we talk about creating those one-click templates where you just log in and click to run it. A lot of times you might need to make a change, and you can easily make those changes from this top right corner without changing the template. So one thing I just want to show you is under this gear, there's the ability to flip the view. So right now we're organized with the division first, and under the division is the computers. In this particular case, I already know all of these computers are in this division, so it's not going to change a whole lot. We're just going to see the computers as the primary object, and then the same division listed under all of them because we targeted that one division. But you could see very easily I can flip the view, and in a lot of cases that's really helpful. If it's computer by user, for example, flipping that view kind of lets you see all the computers a given user logged into. And then a couple more here I just wanted to point your attention to. We talked briefly about audits being software installation related. For the most part, I think most people, when they're talking about audits, they're going to want computer by product. So a computer by product report is going to show me a list of computers, and then under each computer is going to be a list of all the software products installed. So that's typically kind of the main audit report you're probably going to need. We can also show in this report when it was first discovered. So the product is there, when was it first seen, and then also in this audit report is going to be when was it last used. So whether or not you're tracking day-to-day usage of a product, this last used column is going to show you when that program was last launched on the computer, even if you're not tracking day-to-day usage. And if it's blank, it just means there's no recorded usage since it was just first discovered. And that information is really pretty powerful. You know, we talk about running usage reports to get an idea of how much your software is being used. But if it's not really being used, or if it's not being used much, sometimes all you need to know is when it was last launched. If that was 2 years ago, or 6 months ago, or never, then a full, complete usage report isn't even necessary. You know, it's not something that you need on that computer or in that room. So don't underestimate the value of just being able to see what's there and when was it last used. So there are a number of other audit reports, but that audit products, prod cross comp is probably a good place to start. And then similar is usage. And generally, in my conversations with our customers, usage div cross prod or div cross program, again, is a good place to start. It's not going to break it down by individual computer, but it's going to show you in each location, in each computer division, what software has been used across the date range. So here's a usage report. In addition to seeing when it was last used, this report's going to show me the total time, the total amount of time spent with that product open. And if I hover over that, I could see that represents total time. And there is a new column that, again, I believe is going to be empty because the simulator isn't simulating usage for it. But if I go to this first icon, I can drag in % active. And I usually drop it under total time because it's a percentage of the total time. And you can click OK on that. It'll rerun the report. Again, it's going to be blank, but I just wanted to demonstrate how you can add these hidden fields or hidden columns after the fact, and then include them in the report. And % active is going to be the estimated percentage of foreground time. So sometimes that's important. In terms of licensing, often how much was it open is what matters. But in terms of how your software is really being used, if you see something that's open for in this case 143 days on a computer total, but you see a % active of 2%, 3%, that tells you a user's launching it and they're leaving it sitting open in the background and not really actively using it for a lot of that time that they've had it open. Okay, now you can see this is broken down products into divisions. There's a couple things I want to point out here. If we come back to that usage div cross prod, I'm going to come back to the report builder, and we've got usage div cross prod. I want to take you through some of the options for some of these reports, and I want to do this in a organized way. So we're going to step through here. We're going to start with this report, and then I'm going to back up to a couple of reports and show you some options that are available only in those. So options and some of these things are going to apply to certain reports or certain types of reports in some cases. So it's important to kind of be aware of what those options are. You'll see what I mean as we go along. Now, one thing that's going to be here for every report is the ability to select to create a template. By default, when we come into the report builder, you see that run now is pre-selected. Like I've been doing, I'm logging in, I'm selecting my report name, I'm making some configuration decisions, and I'm running that report and I'm getting the output. That's great if I know what I need and I'm jumping in right now just to get to the data. But if you don't use this every day, and if you just spent 15 minutes using trial and error to figure out what report you need and you find it, a lot of times it's good to say, okay, let me build a template out of this that's available as soon as I log in, so I don't have to go fumbling through the report builder every time I need this report. In that case, you would choose Run on Demand. And when I select that, you see the Run button becomes a Save button, and I get a list of folders that I can select from. To make a one-click report, a report that's going to show up on the main reports page as one of those pre-configured templates, the only thing I really need to do after selecting On Demand is to select the one-click folder. Any on-demand report that's saved to the one-click folder is going to show up on the main reports page here. Now, what I would also probably want to do is give it a custom name so that it isn't just called usage div cross prod. I might call this software product usage by division trailing 30 days. So it kind of explains the abbreviation and includes the date range that this is pre-configured with. Something like that is going to allow other users, when they log in and hit that reports page and see that template, to kind of have a better idea of what they're going to get on the output. So keep that in mind. You can give it a custom display name, and you might have noticed back on that. Let me jump over here and go there really quickly. If we just look at this page, a lot of these have these descriptions of the reports and some of them don't. That description comes from notes. So if I come down to notes and type something here and then save this report, Now, if I come back to this reports page and we refresh the page, here it is with that note listed as a descriptive paragraph. So that's something to be aware of for those one-click templates, is you can add a more detailed description if you go down to notes and add it there. Another thing that popped up when I selected run on demand is this replace previous run setting. You're almost always going to want to turn that on so that when you click to run the report, the new copy of that report that gets run overwrites the previous time it was run. So you don't end up filling up the server hard drive with old copies of reports you don't need. So that's what that is going to do. And then the last option here to run on a schedule, when I select this, you see it allows me to select how frequently I want to run it. And when I make a selection here, it allows me to run it. By default, it's going to run on the first day of the month at 12 a.m. But if I wanted to run it on the second day of the month, I could do a delay of 1 day. And if I wanted to run it at 8 a.m., I could jump in here and do it at 8 a.m. So that is this Save As tab. And I think that covers everything that you're going to see on any given report here. For date range, obviously, this is pretty self-explanatory what's going on here. Not every report needs a date range, though. Audit reports are just showing you what's installed. That first report we ran, the computers report, is just a static report of computer hardware details. So the default date range selection in the in the web interface here is always trailing 30 days. So if you come in here, you can make a selection, including a custom date range where you manually choose your dates. And I want to point your attention here to this date range, which actually has a specific time period and date range pre-selected. You can create your own custom date ranges and add them to this list of options here. That's done under settings. You go down to time sets. And then on time sets, you see date ranges down here. If I click this plus, it will allow me to give it a name, start and end date, and then save it. So time sets are an interesting concept. And I want to explain what these are for. There's a couple of ways of creating them. You see time sets is where we created that date range. If you use our lab maps functionality, time sets are automatically created when you create a schedule for a lab or classroom. So a lot of these were created as a part of a schedule for a division. So you can have general purpose ones, or you can have open hours for a specific lab or classroom. Time set of the active scope means if I've selected a division up top here and that division has a time set associated with it, just automatically apply the time set for that scope. So it'll dynamically change to whatever scope I happen to be using, if there is a time set for that scope. Time sets according to scope, actually, I haven't seen that before, and I don't know what the difference would be. Maybe Julian can drop that into chat. I
believe, if I'm remembering correctly, if you were to run this report usage division by product, it would for each division apply the time set for that division, all within the same report.
So multiple divisions. Okay, that almost seems like that would almost make this unnecessary, but that makes sense. And then specific time sets allow me to apply any given time set to this report, regardless of scope. And then a custom time set is basically going to allow me to create a on-the-fly one-off time set for the sake of this report. So I can build out, let's say I wanted to look at a particular class period that meets Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. I could set that up to run. I think this would require me to type this because I thought the default is 12 a.m. But something like this, I could select a date range if I just wanted to look at a particular time period as a part of this time set. But remember, there is a date range selection that's applies to the whole report anyway. So the reason that that's there, and the reason that time sets can be really powerful, is because, first of all, if I were to run it the way it's currently set up, I've got trailing 30 days, so that's going to define the range of the report in terms of the days. And then this would restrict the usage in the report across those that date range to these days during these hours. I could add additional ones as well. So let's say I wanted Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 11 to 12:30, but then I also wanted Saturday and Sunday at a different time. I could include the data for multiple time periods within one time set in this report. So it really allows you to be very dynamic and very specific about what data are we going to include in this report. And then if I toggle excluded, basically what that's saying is to give me the inverse. So this would take, by toggling excluded on it, saying, okay, exclude this time period when I run the report and include everything else that's not within that time period. So that's the basics. There's more detail I could get into of various ways that you might combine hours with excluded hours, but that's the basic idea here. And let's go ahead and get rid of these and come back. Now, target it's good to know what this is for. In most cases, you're going to scope your reports on the fly. I'm going to select my division when I need to run it on this division up top here. But for a report that starts with div, I can target that division. And what's cool here is it's going to allow me to, if I wanted to see multiple divisions without seeing all divisions, I could target multiple divisions here, whereas in the scope, I can only choose one. Now, sections are aggregates of divisions, and maybe a section would work for what I'm trying to do. But if I just needed to be specific about which divisions and I need more than one, then that's an example of what target, what I could use a target for. Now, this is a report that starts with div. If I had a report that started with users, then I could type a username if I wanted to target a specific user or a specific group of users. If this was a report that started with prod, I could type in a product name and target a product. So that's the basic concept behind a target. All of these reports are going to run across all objects if you don't target anything specific and don't select a scope. But if you choose a target, you're narrowing the focus to the object or objects that you've selected as your target. And then another thing to know about is aggregation. This is fairly new. And go ahead and explain. In this report, it doesn't look like I get more than just this one asterisk option, which means that if I were to run this report with division aggregated, it's going to basically collapse all the divisions down as if they were one computer group. So let's say I wanted to target two or three labs, but I wanted to treat them as one. I could use this aggregation. I could target Adams Lab 1, Adams Lab 2, Adams Lab 3, aggregate with this asterisk, and it's going to collapse those three divisions down and give me total usage across the three divisions as if they were one location. Now, that's one type of aggregation, and it's sort of global aggregation. Everything in the report aggregated all at once. But if I choose a different report, and let's do one that has computer first, and we come down to target and we look at this aggregation list, now I'm getting a list of computer fields or computer columns. And if I make a selection here and run this report, what we're going to do is we're going to get that same kind of aggregation, but instead of just collapsing all objects into one, now I'm aggregating by manufacturer. So this is showing me for my Apple computers, these are all the software that's been discovered on any of my Apple computers. If I come back up to the top and collapse that down, we can see, okay, so here's all of my Dell software installed on my Dell machines. So that type of aggregation, the ability to select a property and then aggregate based on that property, is a new feature. You'll see that in some of these, it's a pretty long list. They're not all going to give you meaningful, interesting data. But in the case that you need to aggregate that way, that option, it does exist and it's available to you. All right. If we look at tags, again, it only means something if it exists for the objects that you're running a report on. So let's look for a report that's going to look at computers usage computer by program. When I select that, because we have computer tags on this server, it gives me a list of those tags. I can select one of these tags, and it just simply means let's narrow the scope of this report to only the computers that have that tag. So very similar to using scoping by division or by some other by filter, but in this case, if you apply tags, you can target computers based on those tags in your reports. There is one option that I want to make sure I explain that's going to apply to most reports with div in the name. So let's go up and grab a login div by comp. I want to explain this use division from usage event. It's fairly new. It's been around for a couple of years, but it's extremely important to know that it exists and what it does, because you often are going to find that it's helpful. So by default, if I run a report, a division is treated as a folder with a bunch of computers in it. So if I run a report on a date range on Adams Lab 1, it's going to run that report on that group of computers across that date range, regardless of when those computers were added to the division and regardless of what computers used to be there but are now gone. It's just going to treat that report as a collection of computers and run that report across that date range for that group. With this option turned on, rather than just grabbing that computer group and running it across that date range, the report is going to scan the usage and login logs for events that actually occurred while the computer was in that division. So you can imagine a hardware refresh 3 months ago, and I need to run a report on this lab across the last 6 months. But the computers that used to be there are no longer there. When I turn this on, not only will the report exclude any usage on the computers that are there that happened when they were somewhere else, if they were in a previous location, but it will actually bring usage into that report for computers that are no longer there, and it will only include the usage that occurred when the computer was in that division. So I hope that makes sense. It's not on by default because it's a fairly new feature. We don't like to make changes to the behavior of the product without it being something you actually do and manually turn on. But my take would be that this would probably be a good thing to be default on if that were reasonable. Again, we just don't like to make permanent functionality changes where the behavior actually changed without making people aware of it. So this is not on by default. Include computers with no logins. So by default, if I run a report on a computer group and one of those computers was never used during the date range, it just doesn't include it in the report because it's just looking for usage. When I turn this on, it's going to bring in those computers with no logins and just include them with blank rows because there's no data, but it allows you to kind of see the whole room, all the computers. So that's another one that's good to know about. And then you can see this report allows me to select physical and remote. Most of you guys are probably not using remote access, but if you are, or if you were, or if you do, this allows you to kind of separate, or at least get a visual that separates the remote access versus the local access. Okay, so let's go down to a usage report. And I just want to talk very briefly about some of the options that are here for a usage report. So ignore usage shorter than 5 minutes just means obviously exclude any usage events that were less than 5 minutes long. This can be helpful, you know, if you set this to 1 or 2, to exclude from your count any accidental launches or unintentional launches where you open it up and then immediately shut it down, because those very quick open close events will just be excluded from the report. Show results for products or families. This is really helpful to know about. If I run this with families selected on this particular server, it's going to be a bit of a mess because this is an old server that's not super clean at the moment, not super well configured. But if you are tracking software product families primarily, if you go to the manage page and you click yes to track products at the family level, and that's how you want to report. So in other words, I don't care about whether it was Adobe Creative Cloud 2022 or 2023 or 2019. I don't want those separated in my report as separate separate usage events. Then if I choose to use product families only, then when it runs that report and it shows me Creative Cloud usage, it's just going to call it Adobe Creative Cloud and aggregate usage across different versions. So that's another one for usage reports in particular that's really helpful to know about. And then if you wanted to just show the software that's on your availability maps, obviously toggle that on, and anything that's hidden from your availability maps won't be included in the report. So why would you hide things from the availability maps? Well, you've got a list of software that's there for end users to go into the lab and actually use. And then you've got software that's installed on those machines, like antivirus software, that's not really there as a product for the end user. And so seeing usage of that isn't really something that you're typically going to want to do. So turning this on just allows you to exclude that software that's not visible. We talked briefly about columns already, but this allows me to rearrange or add some columns that are not there by default. So that's pretty straightforward. We talked a little bit about notes. And then if I'm going through the process of creating a report that runs on a schedule, or even if I'm not, as of 7/9/05, I can come to this email tab, drop in a comma-separated list of email addresses, and then making a selection for an attachment type. And when I save this template, whenever I run it or whenever it runs automatically on a schedule, it'll send out that email to that list of email addresses. So great way if you've got users or people within the organization that you send reports to, but they don't have direct access to the product, this can be really helpful for that, so that they can get the data, get the report. Now, my understanding is that if you're just doing a run now report prior to the upcoming build that hasn't actually been released yet, the email is not going to get sent out. So that's not the way to send the emails until 7/9/05. But as of the next release, you should be able to drop an email address in here, an attachment, even for a run on the fly or one-off report that you just configure and run all at once. Okay. So that's a lot of information that we have covered, and that kind of gets us through the report builder itself. We've talked about the one-click reports page here. I want to briefly touch on this saved reports page, and then I want to show you a little bit more about when you get a report, the output, some on-the-fly changes you can make, and then we're going to talk about a couple of other ways of getting to reports other than the report builder, and then we'll look at pivot tables. All right, so we're going to come to the Save Reports page. And very quickly, what you're going to notice is pre-selected on this particular interface right now is on demand and one click. So these are the same exact reports that I see back here on the main reports page. Here's that list on the saved reports page. So if I needed to edit one of those templates, this is where I would come. The on-demand version in the one-click folder. And then I could click this pencil, it'll take me to the report builder and allow me to make edits to those pre-configured templates that were created. The completed ones, if there are any, are just the last saved copy of any report in this folder. I can go here to all reports and we can see all of the actual report outputs that have been saved. So these aren't the templates. This isn't going to take me to the report builder. It's going to take me to the saved completed output. And then if there's any scheduled reports, those are listed here as well as reports that I can edit the templates for. You'll notice on demand, there's a lot more here when I have all reports selected. That's because some of the report templates are not on the one-click page. So any template that you want to show up on the main reports page here, you would save to the one-click folder. But if you want to create a template that's easy access, that you don't want everyone to see who logs in, then you can create kind of your own report template in a separate folder somewhere. And then you can still add it to your dashboard in one of the widgets, which still allow you to add it as a linked report or an on-demand report. It just won't show up on that main reports page. So folders and then report types are the two categories here. And then if you see something you want to get rid of, you can either right click it. Oh, I thought there was a delete button there. I guess there's not. But I could come down here and drag it to the trash folder. And if I go to the trash folder, if there's anything here, I think it will allow me to delete it from there. So that's the saved reports page. It's important to know about. There is an equivalent window in Key Configure. If you go to the window menu in the admin console, and look down way at the bottom, you'll see something that just says reports. The equivalent window in Key Configure is called reports, and it's under the window menu. You'll see a very similar UI with the folders and the types on the left side and the list that you see here. Okay, so one last thing about these reports that's good to know about. I'm just going to select a scope and run a report just to get something quickly. And then I want to show you kind of the flexibility. As you saw there, we started from one of my pre-configured one-click templates. I selected a scope and I clicked to run, and that report was pre-configured with trailing 30 days, and here's the output. Now I run it, it's based on that template, but what I really need is the last 90 days. So up here, I can click on this calendar icon and I can come down and change the date range on the fly. I'm going to choose trailing week just so it runs a little bit faster. So there it is with that change. That didn't change the template. All it did was pivot to a different date range based on the output. So that's what all of these options or icons are going to allow me to do, is rather than change the template, make some other change to the output on the fly, including adding additional columns or rearranging columns, changing the date and time format. So if I wanted to just sort of, what you'll see is this scaled one is going to show me days and hours, hours and minutes, just based on the quantity of data that's there. So it's not uniform down that column, but if I wanted to make it uniform and just show hours and minutes, I can make that selection, and now all of these represent hours and minutes. So that's what that does. And then if I wanted to exclude the time for any date, I can select date only. It gets rid of the timestamp piece. What's not listed here for this particular report is the ability to flip the view. but that's also going to be listed under this gear on reports that allow that option. And then the last thing in this top right corner, these three dots, create similar is probably the best thing to know about here. Back on that reports page where I've got my one-click templates, those are pre-configured. This allows me, these other options allow me to make on-the-fly changes. But if I needed to change something else, I either have to go to the report builder and reconfigure it all, or I can run my template and then in this top right corner, click create similar, and it will pre-populate the report builder with the report template information, but we're not actually looking at the template. This is a run now report, not the saved on demand template. So I can select time sets, add a target, turn on or change options, adjust the columns on the fly without modifying my template. So this really prevents you from having to spend a lot of time going in and reconfiguring or changing building a report in the report builder from scratch. And then again, download to various file formats. This list might be slightly different depending on the report you're looking at. Some of them have some options and some don't. The histograms, for example, I don't give you a PDF option. And then open and key configure does exactly that. If I want to just look at this report in the key configure interface, I can click there, and as long as key configure is installed, it'll launch it and open that report up. And I think that covers everything I wanted to show. Up here is collapse all and expand all. But that kind of gives you everything with regards to building reports, the difference between one-click templates, on-demand, there's on-demand one-click templates, scheduled reports, and kind of one-off reports that you can build out and run at that moment without saving any kind of template. And then a couple last things I want to point out to on reports before we look at the pivot tables are, if I come to the dashboard, a lot of these widgets allow me to access the underlying data if I click on the widget. So that's something just to be aware of. Those widgets are generated based on background data that's saved to one of these reports. So if I click on that, that's going to get me to a report. So if there's something that, like this particular report that's going to show when the last session was for a list of computers, that kind of information, you can potentially find a widget that gets you to those details and use that widget as your way of accessing a report. And then similar to that, what you'll see is on a lot of these pages, like the maps page, I can go in to a particular lab, and there is this icon up top here with a list of reports. So this is essentially kind of like applying a target or a scope to the page. It's going to allow me to just run a report just on this location. So if you don't have to start from the reports page, you don't have to start from the report builder. You can go into a location or to a, even this computers page allows me to make a selection of computers, right click on that selection, and you see there are reports that are going to apply to that selection. So not all reports are listed here, just the ones that I can manually target a specific group of computers for. And I think that covers everything when it comes to the primary report builder that we were talking about. One last thing I wanted to throw in here is the pivot table extra, because this is reporting as well. To add this, if you don't already have it, what you're going to do is come under settings down to extras, find it in the list here. It's called pivot table. Check the box, that will install it. And then come to the extras page. You probably will have to refresh your browser. And once you refresh your browser, then you'll see it listed here under extras. And from here, you can build out a pivot table based on your selections at the top. Anything that you build will be saved up here under this recent icon. So just as a couple of examples, if we have a look at this one, this is computers broken down. It's showing manufacturers at the bottom, and then it's showing RAM capacity as your different columns, color-coded columns. Just as a couple of quick examples of things that you might be able to do. This one, I've got a particular lab selected, so it's being scoped. So it's relatively small things here because I'm looking at a particular lab. But with no scope, you can see this one is showing me computers arranged by warranty date. These are, it's a weekly, day of the week thing. Let's look at yearly. So now we can get a breakdown of computers based on what year their warranty expires. Obviously, in this case, most of our computers are Apple computers where the warranty date hasn't been populated, but that's good to know. But we can see, looking out into the future, we can see, based on the, in this case, manufacturer, when the various computer groups are broken down. This is really pretty powerful. You can build the charts. You can also build out, I think this one is a table. So here's a table instead of a chart that's going to show me my divisions here on the left side column. That's my rows. And then we're looking at how many computers by each manufacturer are in each division. And then we can see the aggregate number of computers in there. So just a couple of quick examples of how you might be able to use pivot tables to get custom views of the data that you weren't previously able to do with any of our pre-configured templates.